This video is all about setting up the most basic TSx control system. We're going to show how to configure the chassis mechanically and how to wire it up. So we start off with a single chassis TSx with a couple of power supplies. We add in a node processor in the left slot. Now that could be anywhere except the right hand slot. The right hand slot is for the chassis processor that we just added. Additionally, we drop in a couple of I/O modules. So we have a node processor, two I/O modules, and a chassis processor. The chassis processors communicate with the I/O modules through the backplane. So the data comes into an I/O module, goes through the backplane to the chassis processor. Chassis processor then communicates via an external network to the node processor. Then the node processor sends data back to the chassis processor, which sends I/O signals to the output modules through the backplane. So then we need a couple of term panels to communicate external I/O data into the chassis. So we have two termination panels shown here. Those allow us to wire up field wiring. Then between the term panels and the I/O modules, we need to add some I/O cables. So those are multi-core cables that have screw-on connectors on each end. One end from the term panel, the other end down to the top of the I/O modules. So there's one cable. Need to add a second cable. And then on the ends of the cables, they have the metal hoods for the mechanical connectors. We'll color in some metal hoods on each end. And finally, we need some hoods on the I/O board end of these cables. So that completes the basic mechanical configuration. What's left is to add the external networks. So we've got an I/O network, which has two cables in this system, and a host network. So we use two cables for the I/O network to give us redundancy. Even though this is a simplex system, we make that I/O network redundant just for some additional security for the system. So we can tolerate a single failure of our I/O network and not compromise the operation of the system. The initial network we're adding here is the yellow network. It's that color just because that's what I picked when I was drawing it. We use different colored cables just to make it easy to tell them apart when they're installed. The next network will be green, so we go between the bottom network of the chassis processor to the bottom network of the node processor. Then the second network goes from the would be the second from the bottom connector on each card. That completes the I/O network. So then we drop in a PC because we need to be able to configure this system, program it, and then also to be able to monitor it with the HMI software, the data acquisition software, and all the alarm and event recording software. So that completes the wiring and mechanical setup of our system. So we'll just go through and recap what we have here. A power supply on each end. Then next to the left power supply, we've got the node processor. As I mentioned, that can be anywhere in the chassis except the rightmost slot, which is reserved for the chassis processor. an analog input module and an analog output module make up our I/O for the system, and there you have it. So we added an I/O network, 2 cables going between the bottom networks on the node processor and the chassis processor, and a host network between the top connector on the node processor and our computer. We have one more connector on the node processor for a second host network if required. And there you have it.